Greetings and welcome to our January 2025 edition of the USU Colloquium. Our presenter today is Dr. Heather Frederick. Dr. Frederick received her PhD in psychology from Brandeis University in 1999 and has been working in higher education ever since. An expert in doctoral education, she is the host of the Happy Doc Student podcast and author of the Happy Doc Student Handbook, 7 Steps to Graduating with Your Sanity, Health, and Relationships Intact. But what she is really passionate about is helping people tap into their natural state of happiness. As a founder of the Expand Your Happy movement, she connects like-minded people seeking ways to optimize their time by living life in a purposeful, more joyful way. When she's not working as a change agent, you'll find her humming, walking outside barefoot, dancing to live music, usually 80s tunes, and making memories with her favorite people. I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Heather Frederick. Please take it away, Dr. Frederick.
Thank you so much. It really is an honor to be here today to explore a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My plan is to address the problem of burnout by teaching you techniques and sharing tips that will help you realize a vision of going from burned out to fired up for life. This really is more of a workshop, so I encourage you to get a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil. Yes, let's go old school today. And also to let you know to feel free to put things in the chat box as we're moving through the activities. We'll take a look at those. We'll take a look at those at the end of the session. A few quick disclaimers. Everyone's situation is different. I want you to think that today is really about finding a path and starting to take baby steps. Realizing that everyone on this call is either a leader or a leader in training. I want to be clear, this is for you and not your team. And last but not least, if you know it's time to call in extra resources, please do so, because a session like this is never a replacement for medical or professional advice. Now, this session does assume that on some level you're suffering. And for the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to invite you to consider some ideas that may help you feel better. And I know this is a bold statement, but eventually end your suffering. What I'm talking about here is absolutely radical transformation. And when we talk about such transformation, I like to use an analogy. If we think for just a moment about a chick being born and what that process must feel like. The chick is in a dark space, is starving, feels suffocated. At some point, its own growth will begin to crack that shell. And as it's being born, the world as the chick knows it begins to fall away. It probably feels like it's dying, but it's not. It's coming into a new world. And transformation always depends on letting the things that we've relied on fall away so that we can be open to a new way of being. I'm not going to ask you if you are ready to let your world as you know it end, but I am going to tell you that mine did about 12 years ago. Here I am with my daughters on vacation, and just a little over a decade ago, vacation wasn't even in my vocabulary. Some of my story may resonate with you. I always felt like I was hardwired for stress and overwhelm, and felt like I found myself in work situations where being busy was worn like a badge of honor, or maybe rather I chose to wear being busy like a badge of honor. And I felt like, geez, the more I work, the more work there is for me to do. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Well, I eventually became the proverbial boiled frog until I had a life-changing moment. We all have these. I know you've had one. It's something that causes you to pause and maybe pivot or course correct. Get your life back in line with your values. Well, my life-changing moment came in the form of a plainclothes officer knocking on my door one Thursday evening. And the news that this person delivered absolutely changed the trajectory of my journey. And that news was that the father of my twins, who were 8 years old at the time, had passed away in an accident. And as you can imagine, this caused me to ask all sorts of questions like, what if it had been me? What would my children remember about me? And am I really living my life in a way that serves me? At the time, I was not balancing my work life well. I had fantasies of quitting, but I was in a VP position, and this is something I had worked essentially my entire adult life towards. And I felt like leaving this position would be like committing career suicide. Well, this event gave me whatever word you want to call it. Was it courage? Was it a good excuse to quit my land-based job and move back home, back to the state where I came from, and focus on raising my kids? So for 5 years, I went on a journey, and I was just doing virtual part-time gigs during this time. And I explored by either participating in, or for most cases that you see here, being certified in, things that I had previously deemed absolutely off limits to a research zest PhD. And what ended up happening was that I discovered, or maybe rediscovered, my why, which is probably similar to yours. In short, my why is to inspire. And what I'm really passionate about is inspiring myself and others to find more joy in the journey. And boy, is that tough to do when you feel burnt out. So I'm not going to ask you if you're ready to end your world as you know it, but I am going to ask you if you're ready to play. The first tip I have for you is to stay curious. And you may want to jot this down on your piece of paper. Today, I'm going to be introducing some ideas that if you perceive them through the lens of curiosity, it will open up a space for you to experience different challenges in a new way. So let's just hop right into our first activity, which is to take some nice deep breaths. There's a lot of research to back up this technique. In short, it brings you from a state of stress and overwhelm to a state of feeling calm and balanced. Now, we're not going to through the nose, and then exhale through the nose or mouth, whatever feels more comfortable for you. So breathe in, breathe out. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, filling up your belly, your sides, and your back. And then let it go. Breathe in. Breathe out. How about you take the deepest breath you've taken all day? And then let that go. I'm wondering if you feel more relaxed. And if you do, feel free to put that in the chat box. You know, if you're like me, you forget how effective and how easy this simple technique is. So I'd like to share some tips for helping you take more deep breaths throughout the day. Estimates are that we unlock our devices anywhere between 50 and 80 times a day. So maybe you want to consider changing your wallpaper so that every time you're unlocking your device, it cues you to take a nice deep breath. You can choose other creative prompts like a stop sign, a red light, your phone ringing. getting an alert on your phone. I like to turn up the volume on this simple practice by adding an affirmation. And for today, I'm going to suggest I am relaxed. So how that would look is you just take a nice deep inhale and think I am. And then on the exhale, let yourself feel relaxed. I have found that life is easier and almost always more fun when I'm relaxed. If breath work is something you've been wanting to look into, you can just Google this, check out YouTube. You could entertain yourself seriously for the next few decades, just digging into breath work. Now, because words contain a powerful energy, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about where the phrase burnout originated. Herbert Freudenberger is typically credited with coming up with this term. He fled Germany as a youth. He was working in an industrial plant, taking classes at night. He met Maslow. This name may ring a bell from your Psych 101 class. And during this time, free clinics were popping up. Free clinics were free not just in the economic sense, but they were free from judgment and legal action. So as you can imagine, they treated a lot of drug abuse and did a lot of drug crisis intervention. The clients in these clinics began to describe themselves as burnt out, and the phrase struck. Now, Freudenberger started his own free clinic in 1970. So he worked as a therapist during the day and then went to the clinic that was staffed by volunteers and worked there from 6 to 10 and was often there until midnight. 3 years later, he wrote this: "You put a great deal of yourself in the work. You feel a total sense of commitment until you find yourself, as I did, in a state of exhaustion." And often when I'm in a room of educators and I read that sentence, I see a lot of head nods because you get it. A year later, he used the phrase in a journal article and basically described it as being exhausted by excessive demands. In the 80s, the metaphor was extended to the entire United States. And a year later, the Maslow inventory was released to help us measure this thing we were calling burnout. Now, to talk about the current state real briefly, there is controversy, lack of consensus. Is there use of using an umbrella term like burnout? There are measurement issues. So people are starting to ask questions like, hang on, if burnout has existed forever, I mean, after all, there's evidence in the Iliad in the Bible, and yet more and more people are continuing to experience it. What exactly is it that we are measuring? And in the US, it's not a diagnosable condition like depression, although it is being recognized in other countries, and the World Health Organization does recognize it as an occupational phenomenon. Now, today, we're not going to spend time digging into what is an interesting state of affairs, but rather I just want to use the terms heuristic value, because whatever we call it, we are experiencing it. And if you can name the pain, you can alleviate it. So let's explore how you name your pain about burnout. And on this slide, you see a number of words and phrases commonly used. What I'd like you to do is pick just one that resonates most with you. And if there's something that's not on the slide, that's fine. You can pick that. We are not going to share this, so be true to yourself. Don't overthink it, but pick one word or short phrase because you're going to need it for this next activity. All right, get out that piece of paper and that pen, because now we're going to explore how burnout is showing up for you in your life and possibly discover some interesting insights about how you could alleviate it. So at the top of your paper, I want you to write, I am, and then finish that sentence with either a short phrase or a word. Don't overthink this. Top of the paper, one brief sentence. So maybe you're writing, I am exhausted, or I am in a total state of despair, or I am done. You've got your sentence. Now, immediately below that, you're going to write a different sentence. You're going to start at I am, and then you're going to use a word or a phrase that is exactly the opposite for you of what you wrote above. So if you wrote, I am exhausted, maybe now you're writing, I'm full of energy. Or if you wrote, I am in a total state of despair, maybe now you write, I am full of hope. Or maybe you wrote something like, I am done. Your positive statement may read something like, I am excited about my life. So everyone has their positive statement at this point. And this activity works best if you're comfortable. So let's spend just a minute making sure that we are. Check to see if your legs are uncrossed. If they're crossed, uncross them and place the soles of your feet firmly on the ground. Maybe roll your shoulders up, back, and down. And allow your hands to rest gently in your lap. If you feel safe to do so, please close your eyes. Removing visual stimuli can really help for this activity. Now, I want to ask you, if the last sentence you wrote was true, what would your life look like? Keeping your eyes closed, what do you see? You might see still shots or a moving picture. Just allow yourself to experience what your life would look like if that positive sentence was true. What are you doing? Who are you with? Maybe notice what you're wearing. If this sentence was absolutely true for you, how would you feel? Just one word or phrase, don't overthink it. How would you feel? And open your eyes just long enough to jot that down on your piece of paper. Just one word or phrase. And then close your eyes and breathe that in. Get curious. If this feeling was your way of being, your way of existing in the world, what do you see now? Where are you? What do you hear, smell, feel, taste? Breathe this in. And as you do, I want to ask you, what new feeling does this bring that is even more valuable or more important to you? What new feeling do you have? Open your eyes just long enough to jot that down, and then close your eyes again. And breathe in this new feeling. Feel it in every fiber of your body. Feel every cell vibrating with this feeling. And give yourself permission to experience what it feels like when you have more of this in your life. What do you see now? Where are you? What are you doing? As you see what you see, realize that this way of being is bringing you a new feeling that's even more important than the last. What is that feeling? And you know the drill. Open your eyes just long enough to write that down. And then once you do, close your eyes and relax into that feeling. Breathe into that feeling. As you lean into this feeling, I wonder if every decision you made came from a foundation of this feeling, what would your life look like? What do you see when you have more of this in your life? How do you exist in the world? I'm going to give you just a few moments here to rest in this feeling as I ask you a few questions that just might help you remember what you didn't know that you forgot. What have you become disconnected from that longs to be nurtured? Are you seeing something new you'd like to invite into your life? Maybe you're seeing something that's no longer serving you, and you know it's time to let it go. Finish the thought that you're having right now, and let's take a collective deep breath in and a full and complete exhale out. And in case you missed that, one more deep breath in. Let it go. And we'll introduce some movement back into the body by tapping our toes, flicking our fingers, blinking your eyes open when you're ready. And if you'd like to share your experience in the chat, please feel free to do so. While you're doing that, I want to do a quick debrief because I want to make you aware of layers. You know, practicing knowing who you are is like peeling an onion, and the heart of the matter goes deep. So every once in a while, I do that activity and people say, Heather, I saw myself quitting my job, or I saw myself walking out on my family and moving to Italy. But it's really important. In fact, this is probably one of the biggest nuggets of today's session, and that is it's sometimes less our environment and more how we navigate it. And yeah, I get it. You know, if there's a specific toxic situation that you're in and you need to call in those extra resources, I understand that that sometimes happens. But for most people on this call, it might be true that it's absolutely less about what's going on around you and more about you. You may have heard the phrase, you can change your road, but you take your sky with you. So yes, you could change a job that's stressing you out right now. But if you take your dark and stormy sky with you, that road's not going to feel very different. So please, please, please seek wise counsel, sleep on, and my favorite, journal about any of the ideas that you had today that involved changing your road. But let's talk about, instead of changing our road, how could we change our weather forecast? How can we change that dark and stormy sky that we'd be bringing with us? And that just gets right to the punchline of what is the root cause of burnout? You see a bunch of uncomfortable words here that are used to describe burnout, and the root cause, I know you're not surprised, chronic stress and trauma, whether that's with a capital T or a lowercase t, leads to a dysregulated nervous system. And if we can start to regulate our nervous system, if we can start to heal our nervous system, then we can change our weather forecast. We can become more resilient so that when we're in situations that might be stressful, we can bounce back much more quickly. So what I'd like to do is formally introduce you to your vagus nerve. I say formally because we have been playing informally with our vagus nerve during this entire session. It is your reset button. Your vagus nerve can be the way that you go from stressed to cueing your body that you're safe. And then once you feel safe, you can relax. And again, things are just so much better when you're more relaxed. Fun fact, the vagus nerve comes from the Latin word vagus, which means wander, and you can see it does wander throughout entire body. It is your superhighway to health and well-being. And if anything that I'm sharing with you today is piquing your interest and you want to dig deeper, please check out the polyvagalinstitute.org. They have a number of amazing free resources. Now, I just briefly want to talk about the physiology here. The yellow circuit of the vagus nerve, it goes down the spine here, is associated with states like fight or flight. The red with freeze, and the blue, the ventral vagal circuit, with rest and digest or tend and befriend. So you can see that 2 of the 3 circuits are associated with those feelings that we would lump under burnout, whereas the blue, the ventral vagal circuit, is associated with the opposite of burnout. Now, we like to think of our brain as running the show, that we can tell ourselves and our bodies, we're safe, there's nothing here to be anxious about, there's no need to be overwhelmed. But what we find is that this is a very bottom-up process. In fact, 80 to 90% of the messages are coming from the bottom up. So this explains your experience of gut feelings. It also explains why we may feel something that doesn't make sense to us. And it's also why you can't reason your way out of burnout. So the vagus nerve is part of our autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is constantly scanning the environment and asking, am I in danger or am I safe? And what's important to note, it's doing this through a process called neuroception, below our conscious awareness. This is such an important point because we could find ourselves in a very positive environment. What would that look like? Lots of resources, reasonable deadlines, you're valued for your contributions. But if we're bringing our dysregulated nervous system into that environment, we may smell smoke when there's no fire. We may sense that we're in danger when we're not. So you could, again, change your road, but if you bring your sky with you, you're going to end up in the same situation. And maybe some of you listening to this have done that, have left what you thought was a terrible situation, found one that sounded great, and then ended up feeling the same way. So how do we change our weather forecast? How do we start to regulate our nervous system so that we can feel all these positive feelings that are the opposite of burnout, and build our resilience, because we know life will have challenges. So how can we go through life and bounce back from those challenges? Now, I'm going to share some research-backed activities here. Please jot down the ones that sound fun to you. Anything that involves moving your body, like dancing, yoga, being in nature, vocalizing. This is because if you remember the placement of the ventral vagal circuit here, coming out of our cranium, anything that creates a vibration there will kind of wake up or bring that system online. Gratitude practices, breath work, and connecting with others. Yes, again, you can get more bang for your buck when you combine these things. So that is exactly why going for a walk in the park with a loved one just feels so darn good. Now, I may have you convinced that you're ready to start prioritizing your vagus nerve, but you're wondering how you're going to find time to do this. So there's no point in me convincing you that this is a worthy endeavor if you can't find a few minutes every day where you could start toning your vagus nerve. So let's talk about some ways that you could do this. And again, jot down the ones that sound like they might be reasonable for you, something that you could do. The first is to revisit current commitments. There are lots of assessments out there where you can tap into what are your core values, and you might think you know them, but it's always interesting to go ahead and take a time out, pause, and revisit these, because sometimes we find ourselves in different seasons and we need to recalibrate. So certainly if you're raising young children, or you're dealing with a health challenge, or taking care of someone who's struggling with their health, things may need to shift for you. Once you have a clear idea of what it is that you value, maybe you get curious about finding ways to create a better job person fit for your current situation. And these do not have to be drastic measures. I mean, honestly, guys, if you could shave off 5 minutes from one meeting a day to engage in a vagal toning activity, I promise you the cumulative effects would eventually be transformative. Delegating. This is something that is difficult for hyper competent people. And these are the types of people that tend to be drawn to academia, but asking for help, utilizing your network, whether that's at home or in your workplace. And I know I get it. When my kids were younger, I didn't like to assign things like cleaning the kitchen and doing laundry, or asking someone else to prep a report for me because I felt like, I did it better, frankly. If I wanted it done right, I needed to do it myself, right? But again, a time to get curious. When can good enough be good enough? So maybe just think of one task this week that you could delegate to someone else, just one task. Reducing distractions was huge for me, probably the number one thing I did to get more hours back in my day. This isn't for everyone, I get it, but for me, I went off all social media except for Facebook, because that's where my family is, and LinkedIn, because I use that for professional reasons. And I did not put those apps on my phone. So I have to go to my personal computer to check those. So my time is, I monitor my time much better that way. And also turning off my alerts. So maybe getting curious, is there one tiny thing you could do that might gain you back a minute here and there? Again, think cumulative effects. This does not have to be a drastic measure. How about saying no to new commitments? Also a thing that's difficult for people like us. This sentence has helped me out a lot. It goes something like this. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm currently focused on fill in the blank. After you've done your values exercise, you'll know what you're focusing on. And I'm not taking on any new commitments. You can add for now if you think this might be something you want to revisit later or soften the blow. Or creating space. A lot of us just reflexively say yes without thinking about how this is going to impact our day. So just saying, hey, can I have a day to think about it? Now, I get it. In a work situation, maybe there's going to be a lot of times you can't say, oh, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. I'm really not interested in taking on that project. Or, your boss asked you to do something and it is likely inappropriate to say, can I have a day to think about it? But you can ask to negotiate work priorities, have open communication. Many of us are in situations where we're getting tasks from different departments or different people that aren't aware of other things that we're working on. So maybe calling a meeting and saying, hey, this is everything I've got on my plate. Can we help prioritize these so I can better manage my time and my stress? Last but not least, start small, be consistent, have compassion for yourself. Again, think baby steps, baby steps. Rome wasn't built in a day. A journey of 1,000 miles, starts with one single step. So after sharing this list, maybe you can review if you've been taking notes. One thing you're willing to experiment with, just one thing that you're willing to experiment this week. And then while you're thinking about that, I have found that having a partner come alongside me when I'm thinking about investing in my health and well-being and toning my vagus nerve has been super helpful, not just for accountability reasons, but frankly, it makes it more fun. So maybe you can think of someone who would enjoy doing this with you. And if you can, please write their name down on your piece of paper and make a commitment to reach out to them at some point in the next few days and share the insights that you took away from this session. So on that note, we are going to participate in our last activity. This is hands down my favorite ventral vagal toning activity. There is so much research behind this humming breath that it is really something I think everyone should do before any important task. It's just like it sounds. We're going to take a breath in and then hum it out. You do not need to be worried about tone or pitch or volume. Just do whatever feels right for you. I'll be taking my breaths. You can follow along at my pace or just establish your own cadence. And if you're in a situation where you can't make noise, I get it. Try this later. But while you're listening, play along the best that you can. And I know this might sound weird, but you still will get some benefits if you let me hum you. So let's get ourselves comfortable. Uncross your legs, plant your feet on the ground. Take just a moment to roll those shoulders up, back, and down. And if you're in a position where you can close your eyes and you feel safe to do so, please do that. Relax the skin on your face. We'll take a deep breath in and then hum it out. Inhale. Let it go. Breathe in. Again. Deepest breath you've taken all week. Take just a moment to rest in this vibration and with this calm, clear, balanced state of mind. I want to ask you, what feeling would you like to invite into your day today? What feeling? Maybe it's compassion, wisdom, energy. If nothing comes for you, I always like to default to love. Breathe that in and feel what it feels like when you have more of that. Give yourself permission to feel what it feels like when you have more of that. Let's take a nice deep breath in and let it out. One more time, nice deep breath in. Let it out. We'll introduce movement back into the body, this time by rubbing our hands together and blinking your eyes open if they were shut when you're ready to do so. And if you'd like to share your experience with the humming breath, please feel free to put that in the chat box. Again, it's my favorite. It's great to do in a group. It's great to do with your kids. And I have this silly fantasy one day of creating shirts that say hum with Heather and walking around, seeing people wearing them and humming. But let's wrap up today's session and revisit the problem, the solution, and the vision through a new lens. Might the situation really be that simply most of us are walking around with dysregulated nervous systems? And could it be that a toned vagus nerve could serve as a portal to allowing us to create a community of compassionate educators who are fired up for life? At this point, I have just one last question for you, and that is, do you feel empowered to make one small change, just one change that would help you prevent feelings of burnout, that would help you regulate your nervous system and be more resilient? Just one. And if your answer is yes, I invite you to put that in the chat box. I know your time is your most precious commodity, and I want to thank you for sharing yours with me today. We'll end the recording now for the live session. For those of you watching this later, please look down in the show notes for further support. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.